Predator drones and Nighthawks. These are unmanned surveillance planes that are feeding back real-time information that is being relayed here to U.S. Central Command. And so here at U.S. Central Command, they can give orders in real-time fashion to some of these ships that are firing cruise missiles, to the pilots. It's the same sort of thing that we first saw in Afghanistan, this whole sort of integration, this real-time integration of forces on the ground with pilots in the air. In Afghanistan, for example, which would be the same case in Iraq, they would actually have planes circling over what is known as a kill box, and once a target was located, identified by either special forces on the ground or perhaps by a surveillance aircraft, then the fighter bombers actually vectored in to that target so that you can have a response within a minute or two. So, for example, even if they see, say, a convoy of Iraqi troops on a particular road, they can actually vector in a pilot in that same amount of time very quickly and bring them in and put a bomb on the target. So it's a very quick response. This is something that Donald Rumsfeld has mandated that General Tommy Franks implement in this particular battle. It was something that was implemented to great effect in Afghanistan, and clearly we'll see all of that. But as far as the shock and awe, I think Carl Rochelle and others have it right. I think once it becomes apparent that perhaps if they didn't get Saddam Hussein, if there's no indication that they're going to be able to get Saddam Hussein to leave Baghdad or get some sort of revolution there, then I think you see everything ratcheted up to the next stage, which might be this massive display of U.S. firepower, again with a psychological component of convincing so many Iraqi soldiers that they simply don't just stand a chance if they want to stay and fight. Bianca?
Okay, we will wait and see. David Schuster, NBC News correspondent at Central Command in Qatar, a place no doubt we will be seeing briefings from throughout the next days. Sam, I'll send it back to you now.
All right, thanks a lot, Bianca. Here in the Situation Room, we are joined right now by Colonel Jack Jacobs to talk more about this. And Colonel, not the shock and awe. This was a big surprise.
No, it was a big surprise to me, too. We've all been talking about it and expecting there to be thousands of strikes all at the same time. And I believe that this little baby step was precipitated by some intelligence that we wanted to take advantage of, not make the same mistake we made in Afghanistan. We had Mullah Omar and Osama bin Laden and who knows what else in our sights, and we let them slip through.
Is it your belief maybe they thought they had Saddam Hussein in their sights here?
Yeah, for one of these attacks, but you know, there were lots of them. There were 24 attacks using a very delivery means, and some of them were in the West as well, which would indicate that we had other ideas besides just trying to take out Saddam Hussein.
Well, there's the map up on the screen right now, and of course there were a number of bombing raids, but it wasn't that big shock and awe campaign. But my question is this, do you think Saddam Hussein was in a bunker?
Well, yes, either in a bunker or in an underground facility underneath some other facility that we knew about.
Is there a bomb out there that can penetrate a bunker?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no problem, huh?
Well, we've got these new bunker buster bombs with technology that permits them to sense when they're in an open space and then detonate.
Didn't they drop a bunker buster bomb in this case?
They did.
Yeah.
But we don't know whether he was really in there, or we had a report from somebody inside the Iraqi establishment who said he was in there and he really wasn't, or we don't know yet. And it'll be a while before we find out exactly what took place for that particular strike, but there were lots of other ones, including some on airfields as far west as the border with Jordan. Very interesting.
Right. Okay. And I want to talk to you about the next wave, because we're in the lull, aren't we? There's another big wave. The big wave's probably coming, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the hardware that has been used in this initial rather surprise attack by just about all indications. Let's roll up that guy's in the booth right now. Let's roll up some of this hardware, and we can talk about some of these pictures. What was used exactly here? We talked about that bunker buster bomb already.
Yeah, the bunker buster bomb is a 2,000-pound bomb, most of which is explosive, that homes in on a specific place, and we don't have it up at the moment, but it homes in and then goes right through the top of the bunker or the facility, and detonates later on. Doesn't detonate on contact, but detonates later on when it gets inside the facility, destroying things inside instead of just detonating on the outside and just giving everybody a headache.
Okay, guys in the booth, if you got more, just keep rolling them up, because we'll just keep talking about them as you roll them up.
These are new and improved bunker buster bombs.
But aren't most of the weapons new and improved, correct?
Everything we've got has been improved since 11, 12 years ago. Tomahawk cruise missile. This is the sea-launched cruise missile that comes off the Aegis guided missile class cruisers and other ships that are in the task force. As you can see, it's subsonic, goes about little bit under 700 nautical miles. Got GPS guidance and is accurate down to 1 meter.
And this is a picture. This is the picture that we've seen earlier tonight when they launched.
Now you see that these were launched from places in the northern part of the Persian Gulf and from the Red Sea, which means they flew over Saudi Arabia to get to Baghdad, or over Kuwait to get to Baghdad. And we do know that just before these things were launched, a clear air message was given to Kuwait, to troops in Kuwait, to clear the airspace over Kuwait, ostensibly to make.
And I just want to break in here real quick here, Jack, because we're getting a bulletin that's just crossing now. Sky News in London is reporting that troops in North Kuwait, as you speak of North Kuwait, have now been instructed to put on their gas masks. So that has been a concern, has it not, Colonel, that chemical weapons would be used in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, don't forget that our troops in northern Kuwait, the Marines, the 101st Airborne Division, the 3rd Infantry Division, particularly the Marines and the 3rd Infantry Division, are well forward in assembly areas. And because they're well forward in assembly areas, maybe we can poke out where they.
Boom.
Yeah, they're well forward in assembly areas. They're fairly close to the line of departure that is the boundary between Kuwait and Iraq, which means that they're probably close to enemy troops who are in defense. One thing we've been looking for all along are formations of enemy artillery, because the Iraqis can deliver chemical and biological weapons not only with surface-to-surface missiles, but also with artillery. We need to find the artillery and destroy them so that they don't deliver these weapons, nor do they have the capability of delivering conventional weapons when our troops cross the line of departure and start attacking.
Their delivery systems would be primarily right here in southern Iraq?
Right over we're talking about artillery that can only shoot maybe about 10 or 15 miles, so they're not that far away.
Okay, so they're right there. But we're getting reports that quite a few troops, Iraqi troops, have been surrendering in southern Iraq.
Well, there were 17 the other day.
Right.
There are now there are reports from Arnott that the Iraqi troops apparently trying to surrender to predators and so on. I think we'll see plenty more of that. But I'm very much concerned about the initial contact our troops are going to have in southern Iraq. I'm not surprised they're being asked to don protective gear. It may very well be that we have seen formations of enemy artillery, and before we have an opportunity to knock them out with CBUs, cluster bomb units, or other air-delivered ordnance, we want our troops to be buttoned up so they're not in danger.
So this may just be a precautionary measure,
I believe
simply.
it might. Yes, okay. I believe it might be.
Let's talk about this next shock and awe wave. If you could give us some sense of what we may see here in terms of a bombardment, and that's what we're expecting to happen in hours, I would imagine.
Well, maybe. You know, we were talking about the first phase of the war being this tremendous blast of thousands of
you're saying we've already had one surprise, we may have two?
Maybe we'll have another surprise. Maybe we're going to do it in an incremental fashion because of the kinds of missions we're trying to accomplish. If we think back now about what facilities have been struck in this first strike,
right,
there were interesting kinds of things. Certainly command, control, communications, and intelligence facilities, a number of those. Mm-hmm. Saddam Hussein, we thought, might catch in a bunker. But we also struck some airfields.
Now, this map that we have up there, these are some of the locations that were hit.
Yeah. Notice airfield, Ruwayshid airfield, all the way on the border with Jordan. Mm-hmm. The airfield, the air defense airfield, H-3 airfield, just north of that.
Now, when we strike, when the U.S. strikes those airfields and presumably takes them over, what do we do at those airfields next?
We hold on to them with special operations troops, mm-hmm, in preparation for air landing troops, which we're going to require in order to operate in northern Iraq.
So in essence, they become bases for U.S. troops.
Yes, and I think that's exactly why we might be striking them now, so we can seize them with our forces and use them as jumping off places in order to fight the war in northern Iraq. Don't forget, we don't have access to northern Iraq from southern Turkey now.
Well, the vote is still coming up, presumably today, to use the airspace over Turkey, correct?
Well, airspace over Turkey is one thing. Basing our aircraft in Turkey and then flying sorties out of Turkey, that's something else again. I don't think necessarily we're going to get approval. And that's still not good enough for what we really want, and that is the ability to base our forces in Turkey in order to make attacks in northern Iraq. My guess is that the 4th U.S. Infantry Division right now is steaming down through the Suez Canal around to get to Kuwait. We'll use the 4th Infantry Division as backup forces in order to exploit, but we've got to get some forces up in northern Iraq, and that may very well be why we had strikes on these airfields in western Iraq so that maybe we can bring air-land troops in order to make the attack in western Iraq.
How important is darkness? Because darkness is right around the corner in Iraq now.
Well, we've got a few hours left to go. I think our airstrikes could come in the dark. We can operate in the dark on the ground as well. My guess is that if there is going to be any more attacks, they'll come in the dark, which means if there's going to be any ground movement, it'll come during the dark. But we have to remember it's now the weekend in Iraq. Thursday, Friday is Saturday, Sunday. So, and it may be that we're going to conduct an attack on the Sabbath in Iraq. I don't think so.
Friday.
Yes, on Friday.
Right.
But I think it's unlikely, but it's not impossible.
Because everybody was pointing to Thursday.
Right. As soon as the sun goes down, it's the Sabbath begins, and I don't know whether or not we're going to be interested in attacking during that time, but we'll see.
All right, Colonel. Thanks for the rundown. Do appreciate it. We'll talk to you a little bit later on. 37 minutes past the hour. Bianca, I'll throw it over to you right now.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much. And when all of this started, military officials said that 3 dozen Tomahawk cruise missiles were launched from ships. One ship that has already seen action in the Persian Gulf, the USS Abraham Lincoln. That's where Hansen Hossein is right at this time. Hansen, what have you seen there? When all of this started, you're right there in the Persian Gulf. What have you seen?
Well, Bianca, I've actually been monitoring the flight deck aboard the Abraham Lincoln for the last few hours. You have to keep in mind that the Abraham Lincoln is part of a carrier group. There's a battle group, a number of smaller ships like destroyers and cruisers and submarines to support the carrier, and they're the ones that were firing the Tomahawks, and they can be miles and miles away from the carrier, so we were unable to see any of those Tomahawks take to the skies, and we were told beforehand that if there was any kind of attack, we would not see them from the carrier. That said, in the last few hours, the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln has been very much like JFK Airport on a long weekend. It's just been very busy. I've never seen this many planes on that deck in the 2 weeks that I've been embedded here on the ship. I've seen F-14s and F-18s take to the skies, all loaded with missiles and bombs, and Sidewinder missiles as well. And those Sidewinders are specifically for anti-aircraft defenses. I guess they're thinking that somewhere along the line there might be some remnants of the Iraqi Air Force up there that they have to protect themselves against.
How recently did you see the
Hawk? Sorry, Bianca, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. How recently did you see those planes take to the sky? You say it's very busy up there, but how recently did you see movement?
The last takeoff I saw was about 10 minutes ago. Now, you have to bear in mind that for months, the Lincoln has been conducting operations, Southern Watch, which has been monitoring the southern no-fly zone of Iraq. And I've spoken to some of the pilots, and they say they're continuing to do that, although the operation has changed. It's now called, as you probably know, Operation Iraqi Freedom. However, and they are definitely bombing sites in southern Iraq. They're coming back with far fewer ordnance than they left with, but there's no sense that they've actually engaged, I guess, Iraqi troops yet.
Have you talked with any of the pilots when they've returned? Have they described what it's been like so far?
We haven't had a chance to speak to any of the pilots yet. In fact, the Navy has been clamping down on access to pilots after they get back from their missions. The last time we spoke to any pilots was early this morning as they were heading out, and they just continue to say it's business as usual. We may be leaving with a bunch of bombs and missiles. We may not come back with them, and we're still flying other stuff in Iraq as we were doing before. The mission may change, but right now I can't tell you much more than that.
Yeah. What about the mood there on the USS Abraham Lincoln? A lot of troops that we saw interviewed said that they were just ready to go. It was kind of bothering them to just hang on and hang on. Did you feel a sense of anxiety, relief, excitement when all of this started? What is the mood there right now?
I think there's definitely a calm determination here aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, especially so because this ship has been out at sea, being deployed for a record number of months. It's one of the longest deployments in naval history, and these people are just dying to get home. And now to see that there's some kind of action on the horizon makes them feel, well, you know what, once this is over, we now have a clear sense that we're going to be getting home soon. So there's that. There's also a sense that, you know, we've been training for this for months. We've actually been in quasi-combat situations over southern Iraq. We know what it's like to be in this kind of situation, and it's great that we're finally putting our training to work. And we don't think it's going to be much different, maybe a little more frequent, but we feel that, you know, this is what we are sent here to do, and we're really glad that we're getting a chance to do it, and we believe we'll do it very well. Bianca?
Okay, Hansen reporting for us from the Persian Gulf. Thank you very much. Sam.
Thanks very much, Bianca. I want to get to a number of items that are crossing right now on the wire, a number of bulletins. First of all, U.S. defense sources now saying that British troops were not involved in Thursday's attack. And then there is reaction from all across the globe, and I want to do a quick rundown on that. Russian Prime Minister says he regrets any military means that were used. Indonesia is at this hour strongly denouncing unilateral attacks. China is calling for the immediate halt of all attacks. Meantime, there is some support from Japan and the Philippines. They are supporting attacks from the United States. So we are now seeing at this hour reaction coming in from across the globe from the first attack that was made. We want to go right now to Waleed Fares. He's a Middle East expert and MSNBC analyst for us to talk more about a number of issues that are transpiring. And Professor Fares, good morning to you, sir. First of all, let's talk a little bit about Saddam Hussein. He appeared on television to his people, and he said that they would be victorious. What did you make of, first of all, his speech, and was that indeed, at least do you believe, Saddam Hussein?
Well, yes, that was Saddam Hussein indeed. I analyzed the short speech. He tried to do two things at the same time, which is very difficult. Number one, to trigger interest in a continuous international support to Saddam Hussein, or at least anti-Americanism. He was calling on all those courageous people who can stop the United States on the one hand. Of course, he meant Russia, France, and other powers that are criticizing the United States. But at the same time, he spoke in religious terms. He spoke of jihad several times for a socialist. That's very strange. He also introduced another word, kuffar, which is infidels. I mean, this is the kind of speech that Osama bin Laden or Al Jazeera would use. What he's trying to do is to rally the fundamentalists on his right and, of course, still try to mobilize the international community to help him.
Of course, there is a great deal of speculation that a number of his troops, his forces, do not support him and are now beginning to defect. Talk about that, if you will, right now. The reports that we are receiving, particularly from southern Kuwait, where a number of troops apparently are beginning to surrender.
Well, basically, Saddam Hussein controls his army through his intelligence services. He controls his intelligence services through his party and his personal guard at this point. The real defection that would come is not just, few hundred of soldiers at the front lines who are fearing American advancing. The real defection will come when there will be a spot in Iraq, in this case could be Basra or Kirkuk in the north, whereby there will be a phased liberation. Other Iraqis, including members of the armed forces of Iraq, would like to see other free Iraqis under the Iraqi flag calling on them. The question is not defecting, it's defecting to whom? They don't want to defect to the Kuwaitis en masse, nor to the Americans. They really want to defect to another opposition, Iraqi opposition, on Iraqi soil. So as soon as an area, a significant area is freed, it will be in the interest of the United States and of the coalition to establish an immediate local Iraqi-based opposition power.
Professor, I want to turn your attention right now to another item which is making news. This in Afghanistan, because of course you know a great deal about Al-Qaeda and the war on terrorism. There is word that about 1,000, I should say, U.S. troops launched a raid on villages in southeastern Afghanistan, and they are hunting for members of Al-Qaeda. This was timed almost simultaneously with this initial bombing in Iraq. What do you know about this hunt in Afghanistan?
Well, from the perspective of Al-Qaeda, it was expected. They have tried in the past to mobilize and to basically do the first strike against the United States forces before we move into Iraq. Now, certainly Al-Qaeda would like to pose itself as the defender of Iraq, not the defender of Saddam Hussein. Now that this dual attack on Iraq and on Al-Qaeda basically would be received by the Al-Qaeda folks as we can do two fronts at the same time. Don't try to ignite terrorist activities elsewhere, because we are able to go on two theaters at the same time.
I want to ask you about a report that's coming out of the Washington Post this morning, and I'm reading from the AP Wire Service with regards to this. Just hours before the U.S. launched that surprise attack in Iraq, the CIA apparently informed President Bush that the spy agency believed that it did indeed have a fix on Iraqi President Saddam Hussein. Does that surprise you that there was that much intelligence, that level of intelligence by the United States on the whereabouts of the president of Iraq?
Not really, because in contrast with a previous situation back in 1982 when Mr. Arafat, at the time head of the PLO, was running away in West Beirut from Israelis, Arafat had the support of all Palestinian forces at the time. Saddam Hussein is a brutal leader, but he doesn't have the support of his own people. So definitely Western intelligence services, including, of course, the CIA and other American agencies, must have gathered a significant amount of information and left them for the moment, for D-Day.
From your research that you have done on Saddam Hussein, what do you suppose he is thinking right now? And this may be the $64,000 question of the morning, but what does he do next? Do you have any indication what's around the corner?
Well, Saddam Hussein of this morning is different from Saddam Hussein of yesterday for two reasons. Number one, the attack against him, and it was very visible in his speech. It was visible on Al Jazeera when we saw 2 or 3 ministers in his government coming and criticizing the United States. I mean, if 10,000 Iraqis would have been killed in the battlefield, he would be smiling. But one rocket on his bunker, and of course he appeared different. But Saddam Hussein basically had 3 lines of defense, or thought he had. One was at the United Nations, which basically collapsed. The second was a perception that European governments and Arab regimes or governments would come to his rescue and won't let this happen. And he sees that it's not going to happen anymore. The last line of defense, basically, is the Iraqi army, the Iraqi armed forces. And at this point, and I go back to the first statement I made, any free spot in Iraq is going to be the beginning of the end of his regime, even if it takes time on the ground. His nightmare would be to see Iraqis with Iraqi flag criticizing him in Arabic.
Professor Waleed Phares, thank you very much. You're an MSNBC analyst. We do appreciate the insight, and of course, we will be seeing more of you later on this morning. Take care. Bianca?
Well, it was just a little more than 2 hours after the deadline President Bush had given Saddam Hussein and his sons to leave Iraq or face war. Just a little more than 2 hours after that deadline expired, that President Bush was in the Oval Office addressing the nation, telling them that the war had indeed begun. This is going to be a long, difficult battle, but U.S. troops will succeed in their mission to disarm Iraq and free the Iraqi people. Let's now take a listen to President Bush's speech earlier this evening.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign. More than 35 countries are giving crucial support, from the use of naval and air bases to help with intelligence and logistics to the deployment of combat units. Every nation in this coalition has chosen to bear the duty and share the honor of serving in our common defense. To all the men and women of the United States Armed Forces now in the Middle East, the peace of a troubled world and the hopes of an oppressed people now depend on you. That trust is well placed. The enemies you confront will come to know your skill and bravery. The people you liberate will witness the honorable and decent spirit of the American military. In this conflict, America faces an enemy who has no regard for conventions of war or rules of morality. Saddam Hussein has placed Iraqi troops and equipment in civilian areas, attempting to use innocent men, women, and children as shields for his own military, a final atrocity against his people. I want Americans and all the world to know that coalition forces will make every effort to spare innocent civilians from harm. A campaign on the harsh terrain of a nation as large as California could be longer and more difficult than some predict. And helping Iraqis achieve a united, stable, and free country will require our sustained commitment. We come to Iraq with respect for its citizens, for their great civilization, and for the religious faiths they practice. We have no ambition in Iraq except to remove a threat and restore control of that country to its own people. I know that the families of our military are praying that all those who serve will return safely and soon. Millions of Americans are praying with you for the safety of your loved ones and for the protection of the innocent. For your sacrifice, you have the gratitude and respect of the American people. And you can know that our forces will be coming home as soon as their work is done. Our nation enters this conflict reluctantly, yet our purpose is sure. The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder. We will meet that threat now with our Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines, so that we do not have to meet it later with armies of firefighters and police